Planning Board is now in session. Good evening. It's now 7 o'clock. We have an agenda item for that. I'll ask the town planner to address the 6:30 initial agenda item. Karina?
The Planning Board held a meeting on October 2nd, specifically to discuss Stonebrook Village subdivision release of units from the covenant. What culminated at that meeting was we were going to continue the discussion to this meeting, and later today, at that last meeting, it was determined that we needed additional information on work remaining on that project. So in the interim, we've had an inspection done and some estimating is done, and the information came in this afternoon, and the proponent for Stonebrook Village asked if they could be postponed to the upcoming meeting, October 29th, for the Planning Board. So that's why there's nobody here for 6:30. So we're going to move on to the 7 o'clock public hearing. That was continued from September 17th.
So that's the current agenda item. It's 7 o'clock. It's 134, 154, 156 Northborough Road. Major site plan approval. It's been continued from June 4th, July 23rd, July 30th, September 17th. And also the public hearing for 154, 156 Northborough Road special permit, lower impact development, which is also continued from those same dates. I'll ask the town planner to give us an update on where we are with this proposal.
Okay, at the September 17th Planning Board meeting, the public hearings, we extended the public hearings to this evening, October 15th. In the interim, on October 1st, Stamsky and McNary and the applicant Joel Aho submitted a new submission with revised plans based on review comments from our engineering consultant Fuss & O'Neill. Those plans were distributed to the town departments and to the Planning Board for review. We received review comments back from the Department of Public Works regarding the topic of guardrails and curbing along Northborough Road, which I will explain as we get further into the meeting. Then we also received notice from the Treasurer's Office that the tax lien had been paid off, and the Planning Board is now able to take action when the time is ready. We received Fuss & O'Neill review comments on this submission, which were forwarded to the engineer and the applicant. And in the interim this week, they did contact us, the applicant, to submit new plans with these revisions, but it was a little too close to this meeting and it would introduce confusion. So we wanted to avoid that. We're going to, I suggested that they bring the plan in order to present and talk about their changes that they've addressed, but it wouldn't be an official submission at this point, just information. So that brings us to tonight. There were a couple of outstanding issues from Fuss & O'Neill. One of the main factors was some groundwater separation distances.
I'm confused by your comment that it's not an official submission.
Oh, in other words, back on October 1st, the applicant, based on comments from the Planning Board meeting on September 17th, the applicant submitted revised plans, which were sent to Fuss & O'Neill to be reviewed. Fuss & O'Neill reviewed them. We then sent those review comments to the applicant to make those changes. And they did make those changes for the most part. They haven't been reviewed yet, but that would be the new submission. But that was not 7 days away from this meeting, so the public doesn't have a chance to review it, and the planning board doesn't have a chance to review it. So instead of them making the 17 copies that get distributed everywhere, I suggested they just submit a couple sets or one set and just present it tonight, how they address their comments, because there could be more comments tonight, instead of wasting all that paper.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome back, Council. Could you introduce yourself and your team?
Certainly. Mark Bobrowski, my office is in Concord. I represent the applicant. To my left is Bill Hall from Stamsky and McNary. He's going to take the spotlight this evening and go over the review comments of Fuss and O'Neill. And behind me are Dan and Joel Aho.
Good evening. So I'm sure you're all very familiar with the project by now, so I'll just go into the changes that we made on it. What I'd like to start with are the changes that we made based on the board's comments at the previous meeting. So to start, we adjusted the width of the entrance and exit in these areas to 20 feet to help accommodate the fire truck turning radius. A comment came up about running turning templates on the entrance and the exit and through the site, and MDM Engineering, the traffic consultants, have run that, and that's submitted with your application to show that that works with the now 20-foot wide entrance. In our waiver request for the landscaping, we've indicated the exact distance to waive to the landscape buffer. At this closest point, it turns out that it's 5 feet, and then also at a spot over there. So that's the exact distance in the waiver. The question of mature trees came up and what would be left. When we went out and did the soil testing for the last revisions along the front, we walked out to the back of the site, and there's actually a stone wall shown on the existing conditions plan that starts somewhere in this area, and it meanders along the back lot line and then takes a left up into this, just about this corner here. And that's the limit of the mature trees. So they cleared pretty much to the rear lot line, or to the rear lot line, because beyond the stone wall is the railroad property, and that's where the mature trees are. So those are on railroad property. I also looked at the GIS on your town website, which conveniently was taken in 2011, and it looks like it was right after they cleared the site, and that coincides with what's shown on the plan. As Karina mentioned, we reviewed the need for a guardrail on the road. We contacted Karen Galligan at the DPW about this. She's supportive of the plan that we have. MDM, the traffic consultants, reviewed the need for a guardrail along the front of the building, along this frontage, and they did not see a need. However, they requested that we add a guardrail in this area on the plan, so we've provided that because this is a steeper section of the site. So we have provided that guardrail in that area. The question of the grade in front of units 1 through 4 came up. So we've raised that, I believe 4 feet, 3 to 4 feet from what was previously shown. So that change was made as well. Then just on the architectural plan, this is the new front elevation with, you'll notice, windows instead of doors, so the doors were removed from the front elevation. So those were all the changes that were made from the comments at the last meeting. So to get on to the changes that were made from the most recent Fuss and O'Neill letter, they had 4 comments that they would like us to address. The first one was regarding, as Karina mentioned, separation to groundwater in the rain gardens. There's a soil media and amended soil that's provided in the rain gardens for extra filtration, and they were requesting that we provide the separation to groundwater to the bottom of that soil media. So we have adjusted the depth of the soil media in the rain gardens where necessary to provide that separation to groundwater. That's not in the packets that you have. That would be in a revision that's upcoming, hopefully incorporating any comments that may arise tonight as well. The next comment is regarding the rain gardens being partially within the right-of-way. Again, to reiterate, we sent this to DPW. They recognize that it's within the right-of-way. They don't see a problem with it, and they'd be supportive of it because they think it greatly improves the roadway and really helps the drainage situation on the road. The next comment was regarding the porous pavers in this section of the driveway. They were within the 100-foot buffer zone to the wetlands, and Fuss and O'Neill pointed out that per the stormwater handbook, you have to be greater than 100 feet to a surface water. So we had to remove that porous pavement just in this area and go back to essentially what we had before with a hydrodynamic separator going into subsurface chambers. That's really one of the only BMPs that you can get 50 feet away from the wetlands that's allowed in that area. We still have a large amount of porous pavement on the site. And then the next comment goes to the septic tank and pump chamber separation from the porous pavement. I had called Fuss and O'Neill about this comment because they were requesting 50 feet from the porous pavement because the stormwater runoff is discharging to a tributary to drinking water. I clarified that comment with them, and since this porous pavement was the only one that had an outlet, that was the requirement that they were requesting. They did not have a concern with this porous pavement since it stores all the runoff on the site and it doesn't overflow into the wetlands that's a tributary to drinking water. So that comment will be cleared up just by the removal of this and having the separation between the subsurface and the septic tank and pump chamber. And those were the 4 comments. We're confident that we'll have a clean sheet come back from them and every comment will be cleared up. So if the board has any questions, then we'd be happy to answer them.
Very good. Thank you for the efficient presentation.
You're welcome.
I'll open it up to the board, but we're not going to be able to vote tonight or even consider that. So I just want to put out that if the board pleases or would allow, if you wanted, you can come back at our next meeting on the 29th. And between now and then, if the items that you've described are given the green light by Fuss and O'Neill, then we're at the point of having a decision document with the conditions. So the town planner has already started that process, a draft list of conditions and language typical to a site plan approval decision document. We still have a couple more things, but in the meantime, what might be helpful is after tonight, the town planner will probably get to a point where the draft is as far as she feels comfortable with, and then usually it's sent to town council for review. But we'd also send it to you, and you can chew on it a little bit and fine-tune it to the point so that at our next meeting, if we're at that point, it can be done quickly.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Right. Well, we see that you're addressing all of our concerns one way or another, and that's what needs to be done to move it toward that point of a vote.
Here's one last, if I might approach.
Yeah.
I think you have a copy in front of you, but I have a copy for the other board members as well, so if you just pass those to your right.
Right. We had the discussion about the mezzanine.
Right.
And the use of it, and its counting toward square footage. And I looked at what you have here. So I guess if, you're saying prior to construction of any storage area within a unit, the landlord and/or tenant shall confer with the building inspector to determine whether said area does or does not constitute additional, quote, gross floor area, as that term is defined in section 174-2 of the zoning bylaw. So if the building inspector says it does count toward it, what's going to happen?
We won't have the parking for it, and I doubt that they'll be able to build it unless somehow that miracle occurs. So I think your GFA definition says either 6'8" or 7 feet. If the mezzanine is lower than that, it won't count as gross floor area. There won't be a need for new parking spaces, but let the design get played out in the building inspector's office is my suggestion. If it is additional gross floor area that has a need for additional parking, doesn't sound like it's going to happen.
The only, I would suggest, and maybe it's not a good idea, but to add, prior to construction of any storage areas / mezzanine.
Well, that's the target, so I have no objection to that.
Yeah, because the tenant may say, well, that's a storage area over there and it's on the floor.
Yeah.
Or,
It should be mezzanine instead of storage area, 'cause like, we're gonna have a good.
you don't like just the term storage area? You gotta grab a mic if you're gonna, yeah.
To your point, somebody could construct a storage area that's on the ground, and we're already counting that.
So you'd have the language be prior to construction of any mezzanine within a unit.
That's fine.
Okay. Open up to the board. The reason I preempted all of this is because I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on a plan that you've told us is going to be revised.
Fair enough.
Mr. Mills, or Mr. Jenks.
Oh, wait.
Mr. Mills.
So, thanks for all your work. It's been a true partnership. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So the guardrails you addressed, the mezzanine, that was the piece that I had a question on. Karina, did the fire department give you comments back? I know you said you got some comments back from some town departments, but did the fire department give us a letter?
We had a couple of review comments from the fire department early on regarding the width of the access roadway,
Got
which would
widened.
address, and then the concern with the use of within the bays, for example, welding, and what
Right.
kind of equipment or,
But have they seen the updated plan with the width
no.
to go through?
They've seen the plans that were submitted, dated, what you have on here, September
24th.
24th. That's the plan that's on the table that's been reviewed. They haven't seen, nobody has seen except tonight, these new revised plans.
And we're gonna,
That has to be submitted with all the changes, go to Fuss and O'Neill and to the town departments one final time, hopefully.
no questions other than that?
Mr. Jenks.
Mr. Chairman, the mezzanine issue is something that could well come up 10 years from now. I think that's an issue that belongs with the building inspector. I think also the issue of, that was just raised, maybe it's the fire department's concern about what goes on in these units. That's also a building inspector's issue. I don't think it's our issue. It's nor is who's going to rent those our issue, because those could change year after year after year. And once this project is approved, assuming it is, who's in it and what they're doing is no longer the planning board's issue. That's up to the building inspector, in my opinion. And while I'm on the subject,
Phil, could I just ask you, does that mean you object to this as a condition?
well,
You think it's redundant?
I think it's a condition, I mean, it's okay as a condition, but it's a one-time event for us.
Agree.
After that, it's not up to us.
Yeah, this language and the additional language that we talked about as far as taking photos and submitting them to the building inspector was a result of several discussions that I had with the building inspector regarding his concerns. And it didn't seem to be too burdensome to have this as a condition. And I agree with you, they're not gonna come back here with the pictures or the information, they're gonna go straight to the building inspector. But if this is part of a site plan approval, it gives the building inspector the horsepower to enforce.
Yeah, I think the building code gives him all the power he needs, but you're right. I've also, I don't understand how the planning board got pushed ahead of the zoning board on this issue. One of the things that's very clear in the purpose of site plan review is that everything is, I don't have the exact wording, but it says something like, is consistent with zoning. And as it stands right now, this project is not consistent with zoning because it still requires a special permit from the zoning board. And I don't know how the planning board can go ahead and say a site plan is approved when it's still waiting for a special permit from zoning. I'll go on record, I'm fine with the project. I'm ready to vote in favor of the project. But I don't understand how we got pushed up ahead of the zoning board on this.
If I might, that may no longer be the case because the zoning meeting is on Wednesday.
Terrific.
So if they are to, I'm sure they'll ask how this proceeding is going, and most zoning boards would want to know that the details have been worked out, if you will, at the planning board level. So my guess is that meeting will be a one-night open and close,
Well,
I'm hoping.
I disagree with you. In my experience, the zoning board has nothing to do with how it's worked out at the planning board.
Oh, no, I agree, it's your decision.
There are steps.
Yeah.
And you get the zoning, and then you go to the planning board, but
If I may add to that as well, if I'm recalling correctly, when we went to zoning, they had actually requested that we go before you, at least for a little bit, to see how you would weigh on the subject before we went back to them. So that's how it progressed
yeah,
from there.
that's fine, but I think that has extended into, here we are ready to approve a site plan. Well, I'll take that back. We're ready to vote on a site plan.
Well, you already said
I
they have
know-
one vote.
I know what my vote will be, but
Sounds like it'll all work out timing-wise now if the ZBA closes.
I won't. Other than that, I have no questions.
Mr. Stein?
So on the previous plan, there was a walkway at the front of the building, and that has been eliminated, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
And the doors that were at the front of the building, that has been eliminated?
Those have been removed, yes.
And there's windows there now.
Correct.
Entrance and egress to the site, if my memory serves me correct, that was the western entrance, and the eastern point was the exit
That's correct, yes.
of those driveways, and it's just one-way traffic the whole through, correct?
Correct, yes.
From our left to right. Has there been any changes with snow storage and removal, as far as where the snow is gonna go?
No, not since the last meeting, I believe.
Right, and if my memory serves me correct, that was gonna get pushed off to the eastern point of the
That's-
site?
That's correct, yes.
And the dumpsters were gonna be, if you don't mind?
Sure, yeah, the dumpsters are on both ends of the site. So there's a couple in this area, and then there's one there and a row here.
Have there been any changes to the points that were agreed on in terms of landscaping with the Open Space Commission?
No, the landscaping plan, I believe, was revised to address a concern on a note that came up, and they've taken care of that. But otherwise, from, on this submission, the only thing that's changed is our depth in here, so it's really detail work. So it hasn't changed the landscaping. That's remaining the same.
In that case, I would join Mr. Jenks in support of this project and would be ready to vote for approval subject to conditions.
If this keeps up, we're not gonna have any kind of an audience at the time of the vote. Mrs. Luttrell.
To continue on from Mr. Stein's question about snow removal, I think I remember it gets pushed over to the side, and then when it's level with the parking area, it's getting trucked out or something? Was that how the?
Well, we had stated that we could use that parking area along the eastern entrance as overflow storage if needed, and then if that backs up, then have it taken off site.
Okay. So I would suggest that go in the conditions too. And as far as the conditions, I agree that this is a one-shot deal for us, and then it's the building inspector. But I think as specific as you can get with the conditions, it empowers the building inspector to be able to enforce them, because he is required to enforce the conditions of the planning board and the zoning board of appeals. And I agree with Mr. Jenks on the use not being worked out and us having a site plan that, in my mind, if I were to approve it, I would only be approving a site plan for the allowed uses under this, which are office and publishing, or just a couple of them. And that's all I have. And you have to wait till next week to get my vote.
2 weeks. Bouncing off of some of the comments, and I think I know the answers to this, but I just want to get it on the record. You have how many parking spaces?
It's 71.
And how many do you need?
I believe it is 71, but it is on the plan, so let me look at that quickly. Yes, we need 71 spaces, so it's down to the minimum that we need.
And that's because we put those green spaces in some of those spots.
Correct.
So if I have one of these units, and how many spaces will I get? 3?
So that is, maybe Joel would speak to that, because that's something that you'd do with the lease agreement, if I'm correct? Yeah, so it would be worked out through lease agreement, and if they need a certain amount of spots, then he only has so many allocated. It'll go from there.
So if I only need 1 spot, but I tell Joel I need 2, and he gives me 2, and I'm paying for 2, and I want to put a dumpster that'll fit in that spot, is that something that would be okay?
Most likely, yes.
It's probably better than an old van that they throw the junk in. But that's, when you mentioned that the dumpsters are at either end, and I'm in one of those middle units, it's a little bit of a walk to empty it. But that's okay, because there are smaller dumpsters that will easily fit in a parking space, and if that's what the tenant wants, it sounds like it would be okay. You mentioned earlier that the that the porous pavement in the parking area resulted in 100% of the groundwater recharge staying on the site.
That's correct, yes.
And that's for a 100-year storm?
Yes, 7 inches.
Okay. I don't think we have anything else. Open it up to the public. Any questions or comments?
I'm Freddie Gillespie, Chair of the Open Space Preservation Commission, and we've commented on the planting, and in our last hearing, we were talking about the establishment of the plants. And we recognize that this is a very large investment for the proponent of this project, and we imagine that he is as eager as we are to make sure it's successful. But we still believe there needs to be some language in the conditions for that. Unfortunately, I was unable to write up some suggestions for tonight's hearing. I did have a conversation with Joel since the last hearing and agreed that I think what we had put in our last letter was a 2-year establishment, and it could have sounded like an ongoing forevermore, although the zoning code in chapter 174, just lost it here, sorry. 174, 13B, I think it's 10, but it talks about, there's an expectation that the plants survive, and it's not a time-limited expectation. So trying to find a way that works for this innovative planting, native plant ground cover design, but also ensures it's not overly burdensome to the project proponent. You're coming back in another, I guess I'm looking for some direction, in another week? 2 weeks?
October 29th.
So if I came up with some ideas and worked them out with Joel and then gave them to the planner within the next week, is that something that's possible? For a recommendation for your approval, of
For
course.
some suggestions for conditions
Yes.
related to the landscaping.
Yes, I think that's saying it much better than I just did, but,
Well,
and that was okay with the proponent. We're looking at making sure that the native plants become established, because some of these are small plants, and they're more likely not to survive as long as, it's a little more difficult to establish than a tree, say. But to ensure the establishment at the same time, acknowledging that some of this is innovative and you might need to do some adaptations in the future, and also to adapt the planting schedule, because not all the plant material is going to be available on the same date.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, we accept the offer of the Chair of the Open Space Committee, and Joel will communicate with her in the next week.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
We're gonna need a request for an extension. We have the extension letter prepared. I want to, if you want to step up and take a look at it before we get to that point. Right now, the period of approval is October 19th, and we meet on October 29th. So we usually extend to the Friday beyond that Monday, whatever date that is in November. November 2nd. That would be the period of approval for the major site plan and the special permit. So, Council, you just signed a request for a continuation extension of a public hearing, which reads, Hereby request to agree to the continuation of the above referenced hearing related to the above referenced matters and an extension of the planning board's time to reach a decision on such matters. The hearing shall be continued to October 29th, 2018 at 7 PM and 7:05 PM. You guys have been getting prime time every meeting.
And very much appreciated.
The time that the board shall have to reach a decision on the matter shall be extended until November 2nd, 2018, and you sign that as a form of a request. So the way it works is the planning board would vote on your request, and if it's granted, then the board would vote on continuing the public hearing. Mr. Mills.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we extend the approval period for the public hearing for 154 and 156 Northborough Road for major site plan approval to November 2nd, 2018. And I also make a motion that we extend the approval period for 154, 156 Northborough Road special permit / lid to November 2nd, 2019.
Second to both?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, the period of performance has been, the period of approval has been extended. Mr. Mills.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we extend the public hearing for 154, 156 Northborough Road, major site plan approval, and for the public hearing for 154, 156 Northborough Road, special permit lower impact development, to be continued to October 29th at 7 PM for the public, for the site plan approval, and 7:05 for the special permit.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? We'll see you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mills.
Motion for a 2-minute recess.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? See you in 2 minutes. After a 2+ minute recess, we had a couple of minor technical issues that took us a little bit longer. The technical issues had nothing to do with our television coverage. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing for 118, 120 Turnpike Road, major site plan approval, and a public hearing for 118, 120 Turnpike Road, special permit for lower impact development. I'll ask the town planner to give us the background on this proposal. Karina? And read the public hearing notice.
See, I'm learning. Okay. This is the public hearing notice for major site plan approval and special permit for lower impact development per section 174-10 of the Southborough zoning code. The planning board of the town of Southborough shall hold a public hearing on Monday, October 15th, 2018 in the Thomas J. McAuliffe Hearing Room, second floor townhouse, to consider the application of Stephen Cox, Curo Southborough LLC, for major site plan approval at 7:30 p.m. Per section 174-13.1 of the Southborough zoning code. The planning board of the town of Southborough shall hold a public hearing on Monday, October 15th, 2018 at the Thomas J. McAuliffe Hearing Room, second floor townhouse, to consider the application of Stephen Cox, Curo Southborough LLC, for lower impact development special permit at 7:35 p.m. These hearings concern the proposed parking lot expansion at 118 to 120 Turnpike Road, Assessors Map 37, parcels 118-4 and 120-4, to make modifications to the parking area and stormwater drainage system. A copy of the plans and applications may be reviewed at the office of the planning board at the townhouse during normal business hours. Any person wishing to be heard on the proposed plan should appear at the time and place designated. Donald Morris, Chair, Planning Board. You want me to go with an update?
So take us through the, what we've received, what triggered the opening of the public hearing, and the current status, which I believe is presentation only tonight.
That's correct. On September 21st, the planning department received applications for major site plan and LID from Cornerstone Engineers, representing the applicant, Mr. Stephen Cox, who's your manager for Curo.
Manager of the
A
partnership.
little bit closer to the microphone, please.
My name is Stephen Cox. I'm the manager of the partnership, the asset manager of the ownership for both
Okay.
properties.
Thank you. The applications were filed with the town clerk. Fuss and O'Neill, our engineering review consultant, were tasked to begin review of the applications, which they are working on now, having received the proper estimated fee. Legal notices were published in the Metro West Daily News on October 1st, October 8th. We received certified return receipt green cards for all of the abutters except one, which we were also given a white mailing receipt. The applications have been submitted to town departments. To date, we have not received review comments, but they will likely come before the next meeting. Let's see. And in the interim, we have a question for town council that's in the process, which hopefully will have response by the next meeting. And a little history on the project. The buildings, 120 Turnpike was built in 1984. 118 was built in 1989 timeframe, according to the assessor's cards. The property is zoned Highway Business and Residential A. It's approximately 20.5 acres. It consists of a combined almost 161,000 square feet of office space, primarily at the front of, fronting on Turnpike Road, yeah. In 2005, the Zoning Board of Appeals granted special permits and variances for office space in excess of 50,000 square feet, maintaining more than one building on a lot, variance from the frontage requirement of 200 feet down to 125 feet, and a side yard setback from 50 feet down to 17 feet. In that zoning board decision of 2005, there was reference to a May 2nd, 1984 zoning board decision where originally there were 3 buildings proposed, but were never exercised on, and that decision of 2005 indicated that that was not permitted just because they allowed those special permits in 2005. So that's a little history of what we found. The site plan, I think, predates planning board records because it was in the 80s.
Yeah.
But that's a little history on what we found on the project. And I'll pass it back to you, Don, so they can describe what they're going to do there.
Thank you. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Maybe a little bit updated history, just for 2 minutes, might be helpful. We purchased both of the buildings in a time span from December 2013, the back building, and then February 2014, the front building. And they had been occupied by one tenant for a very long time. The front building, frankly, was foreclosed. The back building was not, and it was still occupied by a single tenant, Hewlett Packard. So what it is the first time actually that these 2 buildings have been owned by the same owner, sorry for that, since they were built. There was a ground lease arrangement between the 2 buildings. There's been separate owners since then. So this has provided us the opportunity to do planning for the entire site and control the entire site. So during our ownership, we installed a Title V large septic system for both buildings. The original system had failed. And we've totally remodeled the front building, which is the 118 building, and that's occupied now, roughly 90% occupied. The 120 building, the building in the back, has been occupied by Hewlett Packard, and they vacated the end of last month. So we're in a leasing mode in that back building, and that's really what this conversation is about. It's about employment, occupancy, and the required parking, and over the last 10 years, at least, people have been requiring more and more and more parking as they've been able to redesign their office space to have less square footage per person. And while we meet the zoning code, we own all this excess land. I don't know if we can pull up the triangle. And so what we've proposed to do is add surface parking into the hill, which is well, you can see where it is on the rear portion of the site. And that allows us to upgrade the parking ratio per square foot to be more competitive with what people are looking for. We've had prospective tenants go through last week that wanted to put one person for every 126 square feet of building, which would be like 6-to-1 parking. This additional parking gives us a ratio of 4.5 to 1. That's truly that is why we're here.
All right. Take this. All right, I'm Vito Colonna with Cornerstone, so I can run you through the actual project itself. The site itself, as Stephen said, there's 2 buildings on the site. Right now, 118 is at the front, 120 is in the rear. This is, say, Turnpike Road to get orientation. The reservoirs are over here, Breakneck Hill Road, kind of down here. There's like the Starbucks and stuff right over in there. So right now, they do have parking to the rear, the side, and then this kind of accessory not accessory, but it's sticking out kind of appendage on the property. That's also parking over there. That's also where the septic system is, which is why that was kind of cut out like that originally. So what we're looking at is kind of going up into this rear area. Right now this is wooded. It's a pretty good sized hill. If you've been out there, I don't know if any of you have been out in the back to take a look at this before the meeting at all. But when you're out there, this is that wooded area to the rear. So right now this is, overall 20.5 acres. This portion in the back, I believe, is around 8 or so. So we're looking to create some parking, this kind of hatched area right in here. So this is a better view of the actual work area itself. So as Stephen said, we do have enough parking for the buildings by zoning. I think we have about 550 spaces right now. This would create 166 more, and just to get them more competitive with other buildings for the actual use that people are seeing these days. So what we'd look to do is kind of cut a road up into the hill. So we'd grade up pretty quick, and then once we get up in here, we're actually up at natural grade. We just kind of get up on the top, and then we're up at natural grade and through here, and then we have one more step up through here. So on the front side, even right here, there's not even any grading throughout in here, so we're kind of right at natural. Back side, we got a cut, step up, we're at natural, and then a cut in the back. So overall, it is a net export of material, but we did try to balance that as much as we could. We did look at options where we just kind of blasted into the hill to make it all flat, and we really wanted to try to match the topography the best we could, even with the scope of the project. We did have some other features we had to work with. We did have this isolated wetland on the top, so we're looking to kind of preserve that. And we also did some test holes up in here, and we have some areas of ledge in this end, and then we have high groundwater in this end. So we have a bunch of things we're kind of dealing with, and this design that came in the end kind of balances all of those in the end. As far as kind of the utilities and everything, we have the on-site septic system. There's a recirculating sand filter here that we have to worry about. And then the only other thing is these return and force lines running through the site. So there's nothing up here that we have to conflict with as far as utilities go, except for a drainage system. And we're going to kind of run through the drainage. That was kind of a big part of the design. Because this is on the side of a hill. There's a large drainage area that comes through the whole site. So right now, there is a swale that directs all the water to this one area. And there's a big drainage area that comes down from the conservation land in the back. It comes up through. And there's a large, it's an 8-foot diameter, huge concrete structure up there that collects the water in this point. And then it kind of routes it right around the site and out. So we're planning on doing the same thing, extending that drain out, berming the water so it won't enter the site, bypassing it through and through the site. So we keep everything segregated the way we had it before. Clean water stays clean. We only have to treat what actually falls onto the pavement itself. And the way we've done that is collect the runoff from the parking and route it down to a bioretention rain garden area down in this area. We did do some soil tests in there, and we did find that it had high groundwater, so we're doing this as a non-exfiltrating bioretention basin. So it filters it. It's one of the most efficient BMPs to filter and treat runoff. And then once it's treated and detained, it discharges to this wetland at a peak rate that equals or is less than the existing conditions. So let's see, and then during construction, we did provide a sedimentation erosion control plan in the set. And one of the main features of that is the first step is to create this berm on the top side. So once that's built, we don't have to worry about anything running through the site. We can work and through this area. That was kind of a topic that we talked a lot about with conservation, was the phasing and erosion controls. because there is a good amount of earthwork that comes through here. So by blocking off all that runoff that comes down the hill, bypassing it through, we create an area it's not dry, but it doesn't have that large volumes of runoff going through it. It'll enable them to do all the earthwork without major issue going through there. Let's see. As far as, let's see if we've missed anything. We did in your package have a site landscaping plan, which we did have a rendering that's kind of passed around. The plans that were in the package provide all the details, the planting schedule. We did go with all native species throughout the project, and I know that he did add excess plants over and above what the minimums required. We did want to revegetate because we are taking a good amount of trees through this area. A lot of them, though, are pine trees that are very close together, especially on this slope that runs across. It looks like when they had cleared it, they just kind of let it grow back, and a lot of those pine trees are feet apart. And the landscape architect did look at it, and he said those really aren't worth saving at this time, because eventually they're going to have to be cut down. A lot of them weren't healthy because they are so close together. The original idea was to save actually a lot of them on this slope, but he didn't think it was worth actually saving those because you're going to have to take them down anyway. So what he looked at was revegetating, that long slope between, there we go, this one shows it better, that big long slope, revegetating that, and then all the breaks in between and putting those with native plantings. And I think he put the samples different plantings in that package.
There's a sample of the plantings in the being circulated, but we'll get that to you electronically, so
Yep.
you can.
And also in the package was a site lighting plan, and I don't know if anyone's had a kind of a chance to take a look at that. But it's a basic, straightforward lighting plan, lighting around the perimeter and then kind of through this middle island. All the photometrics are on there. I'm sure Fuss and O'Neill will take a look at all the intensities to make sure everything is appropriate. But it's pretty straightforward lighting plan itself. As far as other permits, we have gone to conservation. We've had 2 meetings with them just because of the way the meeting schedules and everything have worked out. Through them, we've had the review from Lucas Environmental, and Fuss and O'Neill did their review. Both of them were satisfied with the plans. Fuss and O'Neill reviewed all the stormwater calculations and found all the peak rate and all that acceptable. And I think we're just waiting on a final review for site-specific for the planning board. I know there are different criterias, but the major items such as the stormwater calculations, they have already reviewed that. And I believe that conservation was satisfied with the plans. We did leave the hearing open until we've had a chance to come to planning board first, obviously in case there are any changes. But they were satisfied with the plans as they were. And one last thing to talk about that we discussed with conservation at the end. So it's not a finalized area yet, but we were looking at, I can highlight it on here, is the town conservation land kind of abuts up here. We were looking at kind of this backland, adjoining that up to the town conservation land, deeding it over to the town. And that's about 4.5, maybe 5 acres, depending on the final design of how everything goes.
Right now,
There you go, take mine.
right now, our tenants, actually, we have a path that we kind of enhanced when we did the sand filter, so they're walking up this way now. So we have, like 4 acres that's directly adjacent to the conservation land already, which might be interesting to the town.
All right.
Thank you. Open it up to the board, keeping in mind that the plans before us are going to be revised. Mr. Mills.
So, am I correct in assuming that's a new retention pond? And that spills into what, a wetlands that then filters into the pond between the two buildings?
Yeah, this wouldn't, so this will go into this wetland. I should just left the other one up. So this goes into this wetland right up in here, and then they connect through two drainage lines that go into this pond over in here. This is a natural wetland, but it was also, I think, dammed up to create a detention basin. But it also had some areas of wetland back when you could, do that, use a wetland also as a detention basin. And then this one was a fully man-made pond for a detention basin. And then there's an outlet structure right at the bottom, right in here. It's like a kind of a concrete box, if you ever go down.
Does that eventually go to the reservoir, or?
Yeah, eventually then there's a channel that goes, kind of winds through here, then goes under the road to the reservoir.
What is that box? I'm sorry, just say again, what is that concrete box? I
This
saw
one,
it over there.
it's a three-sided, so it's got a bottom and then two side walls, and then there's a weir wall running across it. So there's a 48-inch line that runs from over on this site across, and then that's also the one that takes the upgradient flow. That comes in, and that comes into the side wall of it, and then the pond flows through the weir wall. So it's kind of I've never really seen one built like that, but it's kind of right down in this spot. It's a little tough to get to. If you go out there, it's a little overgrown, but you can get down there if you wanted to. But it's basically a three-sided, open-top concrete structure. It was a kind of a custom cast-in-place thing.
To control the flow?
Yep.
So going with the theme of concrete structures, you said there was another one up in that area that you're talking about giving to the town, or no? Where
Oh, this
the
one,
new parking's gonna be?
yeah, where the parking is, flipping these around. Where the parking is right now, there's a big concrete structure here.
Okay.
So we just moved that, extended the pipe out. So we still take the same flow and bypass it through the site the way it was intended before. You'd rather take this, larger amounts of flow and not have it go through your treatment system. It's taking it from the green areas above, so presumably it's clean, it doesn't need to be treated. So you kind of keep them separate. So this bypasses right through and goes around.
So due to the topography of the land too, since it's higher up there, you talked a little bit about the water coming off the hill.
Yep.
So I assume you wouldn't want to give us the land until a while after you make sure that there's no runoff that's gonna wreck your
Yeah,
parking spot, right? Because I'd hate for you to give land to the town and then be like, hey, now town, you gotta fix our parking, right?
yeah, no, yeah, everything, that's why we put this, there's a good berm on the back, yeah. It's a long-term
That
long-term
would be a
plan. is-
condition that
Then we
you're
can't
not gonna
come
hold
back?
the town accountable for
Yes,
any problem to the parking?
yeah,
Just making
Yeah.
sure.
yeah, that's why we kind of put these good-sized berms on the back side of it. So nothing can get through from here onto the parking too. And then there's sub-drains, along the back edge of the parking here and here to try to protect that sub-base of the parking lot too. But if you could think of a condition to put in there, I'm sure they'd
We
be open
can
to that.
certainly figure that out.
Okay. I have no further questions at this time.
Mr. Jenks?
Vito, the concrete structure that you were just talking about, is that what you described as about an 8-foot round?
Yeah, this one here, I actually got a picture of it if you want to see what it looks like.
And while you're looking for that, the pipe extending south from that and therefore uphill, I take it as an inlet?
Yeah. Yeah, so this, we're going to extend, we have a 36-inch pipe that goes up to a head wall right here. And that's some of the reason we brought this up, so we could get it up over that pipe to be high enough to be able to intercept that runoff coming down the hill. So that way we have a 36-inch line coming up, and a head wall. And we size that.
What funnels into that head wall?
Right now, it's kind of an area from, show it on this plan, 'cause it's a pretty good size area. highlighter. So that's right in here, and it's an area that kind of, and then it actually goes up a little. It's pretty much that. So it goes up into the conservation land. This is one long hill. Some of this access path here kind of cuts off that flow. There's a ditch along the up-gradient side. It's just a shallow one that cuts off some of that flow. But other than that, it's all coming down the hill towards that.
And going where now?
And then it goes through here, down there, and then
Through pipe?
Yep.
Piping on the north side of the, what are you calling that round?
this one.
Yeah.
Oh, this one?
No, up, yeah,
This one?
that one.
Yeah, so this is just the inlet structure, we'll call it, say. And then it goes into, right now, there's a 24-inch line that runs to here, and then this is a 48-inch larger line that goes down to here, to the
You're
discharge.
gonna put a 36-inch line into that structure with a 24-inch
Yeah, and,
line out?
yeah, and the reason we did that is because when you have an inlet structure, you have different types of controls as it gets in there. That type of structure that's on the screen, nice job finding that. When it drops in the top, you have a lot more capacity, and then it can build up head in that structure, so it's pressure that can
Right.
build up, so it can push it through a 24-inch line. When you have it just laying flat, like this is going to be a head wall, so that means it's just going to be a circle facing you. There's losses in that, so we had to make it larger than a 24 to reduce those losses that go in. So it's more of the, not the pipe carrying capacity, but more of the inlet capacity, the configuration, which is why we went to a 36 and then down to a 24.
But all the water uphill, up gradient from that
Yep.
is now going in there, or is it?
Yeah,
going
right now it goes
around
in.
it and-
Yeah, right now it goes into that big structure right here. There's swales that lead it in there, kind of on both sides, so as it comes down, it collects right in there. And on the back side of it, you can see on that picture, there's a nice berm right behind it that prevents anything from getting by.
So you're gonna pipe that to create pressure?
That's just the way it is now, too.
Yeah.
And it just gives it that little extra capacity. It's a hydraulic head that gives it that a little extra. But we did have to go to a bigger size just for the inlet capacity of it.
What is the delta in the elevation of the upper and lower parking, or the average? I know
Yeah, there's highs and lows.
they're on a hill, but
Yeah, like right here, it's 14 feet at the highest right there.
I'm
That's-
sorry, go one more
Oh.
south, the top level.
Oh,
parking.
here and here?
Yeah,
This is not bad. It's 2, 4, 6 feet around.
all right.
Right in the middle, it's about 6. It gets, down less here, a little bit more. I think it's 8 feet on this end, 4 feet on this end. So it's just, down here you have more because we're trying to get down the hill a little further. And we had a pinch point over in here too. And then same with this front slope. It varies, from 6 feet here to 14, 16 feet at the highest, right in the middle right there.
The new retention pond that you're creating, is that piped out down to the wetland?
Down on the wetland, so there's a pipe outlet right up in here, and then it discharges to daylight, and
Okay.
we had to keep it the 20 feet at least off of the wetland for the no-touch zone for conservation. So then it flows overland into the wetland, which is kind of at the far end, and it'll flow eventually through the pipes that are here to the next pond, and then out. So stuff that goes from here has to go through this pond, and the next pond before it finally gets discharged. So it goes through many levels of treatment.
How wide is the discharge from the new retention pond into the wetlands?
In here, this is 20 feet, so it's just a little bit over.
The width of that, I
Oh.
mean, that's not piped, is it channeled?
It's piped up to here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but from there into
Then
the
there's
wetland,
Then there's a riprap or stone spreader at the end.
how,
Should dissipate the flow out. And that varies. It starts, at the width of the pipe,
yeah,
and then it flares out at a 3 to 1, 3 to 1.
Yeah.
So it should flare out and kind of dissipate that runoff out.
Mr. Cox, the perceived requirement for the additional parking,
Yes.
does that say our zoning is behind the times in terms of parking?
Your zoning is comparable to, we have 7 buildings in suburban Boston and 5 projects. Your zoning, your current zoning is comparable to all those. But in fact, the way that, you know, tenants are using their space right now is completely different than like this building was actually built out. We'll be demolishing the insides of this building because it's all individual offices on the window line, hard offices, and then an open field in the middle. And what's happening now is that goes away. There's very few hard offices anymore, and it's a field of workstations or glassed conference rooms and things like that. So instead of using 250 or 300 square feet of building per person, you can actually get it down to like 150 square feet a person, and that's what people are doing. That's just what's happening.
Yeah, we hear from
Would-
people the same thing, other clients saying we need more than the minimums
And you know,
required.
it's an issue because a lot of locations, like I say, we're suburban investors, a lot of suburban locations don't have the space to create that additional parking. We happen to own, you know, the rest of the hill.
Would you predict that we'll be getting further requests from other offices?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Well, they'll have to be able to manage it
Well,
on their
that's-
respective
Yeah, that's the point.
locations, you know.
Mhm.
I don't think it's not good to have vacant buildings either.
That's a good point. Okay, no more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Luttrell.
Thank you. What's out there where the new retention basin is now?
Right in here?
Yeah.
It's just wooded right now.
Oh, and is there some other structure over there or
There's,
some?
this right here, it's a recirculating sand filter. So that's that, if you go out there, that structure it's got a concrete wall around it and it's
Yeah.
open, so it has pea stone on the surface.
Oh, okay.
So that, it's sealed on the bottom though. So the septic system is a bunch of tanks over here, and the leach field is kind of over in this area. And we needed additional treatment through DEP permitting. And the only one that they would allow, because we were over 10,000 gallons a day, would be a sand filter. And so this one's based on a timer, so every so often, I forget the timing of it. It's been a few years now, but every so often on a timer, it pumps effluent up to here. It trickles down through the sand bed. In the bottom of the sand bed is collector pipes, and gravity flows back to the tank. And then, based on demand, whenever it hits the float, it pumps it out to the leach field. So it could go through a cycle where it pumps it up and recirculates many times before it actually gets to the leach field. But that's what this is over in here. It's just a treatment structure. It's sealed on the bottom. If you've been out there, you saw the wall on one side.
Yeah.
But
and
it's
that's what
that
it is.
grade, it's not a
Yeah.
hut, it's
Yeah.
just that grade.
There's a retaining wall around it that's low, and then on the uphill side there's
It's
a
landscape with native, so it actually is starting now. We did it about 2 years ago, so now it's starting to kind of fold into the natural landscape after a couple of years.
Oh. On your major site plan approval application, it says 176 parking spaces, but on the lower impact development application, it says 166?
Yeah, it's 166.
It's
I probably just wrote it wrong.
166?
Yeah, 166.
your fine
I should,
time for
I'll double, I
Peter
can,
to tell
I'll
me.
double
I
check
thought it was
and,
176.
yeah, I'll double check and send it to Karina. It could be
I
176.
think it's 176.
Now that you're saying that, I think it is. I'll double check and send it to Karina.
So that would make me ask, what were all the calculations based on, 176 or 166?
The calculations for their use,
For
The
all the
drainage.
drainage and everything?
that's based on a square footage of this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That was just me writing it down in the application wrong. So it's, like you say, I think it is 176.
And as you said, that's conservation land there, I'd be concerned what that would do to the view from the conservation land.
Oh, yeah, right up in here.
Yeah,
Yeah, so right up in here, there is a trail, there's links up, and then there's also that trail that runs, along in here. So
Yeah.
you would be able to see it from, this portion of the trail right in there, and then obviously, this is gonna be a cut down. So the parking lot itself, from, say you're standing here, looking here, there's gonna be a 4-foot berm up, and then it drops 22, so 36, 14 feet down. So you shouldn't be able to see this unless you're standing almost over it. You'll see a clearing. If you look from here, you'll see that, there's a clearing there, but you won't be able to see the actual parking lot. You'd only see it if this section of the trail, if you were standing right there looking down over the edge.
so is there gonna be any planting over there?
Right on here, we weren't planting any, just because we had some riprap there. We weren't planning on planting on the slope itself.
But
We were trying to give a shelf around the edge of the park, the area right there. If you pulled that forward, you might be able to get a little bit. But there is a strip between here and the trail. It's probably,
This is wooded.
right, between the
It's not-
trail and,
But it's not really that heavily wooded.
right,
Like, I can see the parking lot now when
Yeah.
I'm over there.
yeah, so if you're in here,
Yes,
it's trees, but you can see through them because they're
Yeah.
tall. There's no understory.
Right,
Yeah. Yeah, because that trail's maybe 20 feet or so off the stone wall, right in there, something
Yeah,
like that. But it's
yeah.
tall trees, so you can see right through.
My other questions are zoning questions, the questions we asked Aldo. And this is a non-conforming lot? It doesn't meet, it has a variance for
It has a
frontage
variance,
and
yes.
setback?
So,
So whether that can...
so it's an allowed use as it is today. Yep.
But
Because
it's
we
still-
did confer with building inspector on the interpretation of zoning before we met with Karina on that, and I think we gave you the email from building inspector at that time. Kind of talked through how this was allowable through zoning as an allowed by right use, because it's accessory parking associated with an existing permitted use on the same lot.
Right. But there's a question of whether that existing use should be under Res A, because
This
that's a
use is
Res A
not, no.
lot.
This
Oh,
is-
and that's not, but the parking lot is in Res A.
Right, and under Res A zoning, if you go look under the zoning, do you have?
Right, yeah,
Yeah, there's a specific use under there
right.
that says accessory parking associated with an existing building, existing permitted use on the same lot. It doesn't designate what that use is, so this is a permitted
But
existing
under Res A,
use.
it would be what's allowed under Res A.
That's right, that is, no, it doesn't say that. And that's why we asked building inspector first to confirm that.
And my other concern is that the variances were granted because there would be no not alter the location of buildings or result in any change of use on the property.
Right.
So this is a change of use on the property.
No, that's related to the buildings themselves,
There was a third building.
right?
There was a third office There was a third office building. If we could flip the. There was a third office building designed on this lot originally. And actually, when we looked at, before we bought it, we looked at the old marketing materials, and there was the implication that you can put another 50,000 square foot office building up here. We didn't care about that, but that's what was, I assume what was removed when, in that '05 zoning.
So in 2005, it was deemed that the variance that was granted for that third building had expired and would not be
I
allowed.
wasn't there in 2005, so I can't say one way or another, but, you know, I can say that there were three originally back in 84 and 86.
Yeah,
There was the proposal for a third building there.
right. But in 2005, a variance was granted for frontage and setback
Yep.
on the stipulation that the use on the lot would not change.
Yeah, and that's, we're keeping the
But
same
so that-
use.
Well, it's going from forested to parking lot. That's a different use.
The use, the principal use is still the same. Is that the question of if is the use changing?
Well, that,
What was
so
do you guys know what the question was asked to Aldo?
the question was,
Yeah, that would be helpful.
I just want to clarify, if you look at the zoning board of appeals decision from 2005, it does mention the applicant is proposing no construction or change in the existing use of the property as part of this application. So I'm not sure if that meant this particular one or what Mimi's referring to. Then, a few days ago, we sent a legal opinion request to Aldo. Bylaw Chapter 174, 5D deals with lots in more than one district. 118, 120 Turnpike is in a business highway and a residential A. The chapter states that regulations relating to the less restricted portion of the lot, which is business highway, may not extend more than 30 feet into the more restricted portion, residential A. Residential A allows for parking for employees accessory to a permitted principal use on the same lot. So there were two questions. Does the permitted principal use have to be an allowed use in residential A, in which the 176 parking spaces would be permissible for town government, schools, religious uses, but not for office building? Or is this parking proposed permissible because the office building was a permitted principal use under business highway?
That's what we had asked building inspector, who's the zoning enforcement officer, and he had said that this was an allowed use.
Did we get an opinion from the building inspector?
We got, initially, this was back in January,
Mm-hmm.
we suggested that you talk to the building inspector, and his first response was, there are no use variances allowed.
Yeah, we asked him if we could get a use variance, because that's what we thought it was.
Right.
Yeah.
So he didn't know the background of the project yet, and then his second response was,
I believe the section cited below would allow you additional parking.
Mhm.
Referring to that section, I did speak with Mark again.
Okay.
So there were we were all waiting to see what town council opines.
Okay.
Because it was still gray. Nothing was 100% sure yet. And again, that was back in January of this year, when they initially went to the building inspector.
Okay. That's all I got.
Back to Jenks.
What's your plan for snow storage?
we were just talking about that before this. So right now, they do just kind of pile it in, corners around the parking lot. So we do have, there's landscaping in there, so we don't want to pile too much, in the islands. There is some available, as you'd normally do. These are, 30 feet wide or more. This is 15 feet wide or so between this one. We do have this area over in here. If there's a need, we could always grade that out to create a larger area that we could push it into. Other than that, it's just kind of how they manage it now, which is just kind of pushing it to corners, and then they do ship it off-site right now when it gets too high.
We've removed it quite often, in instead of trying to just pile it up.
Yeah, because parking
That
is
one
a
area-
premium.
That one area above the sand filter,
Yep.
that's an area where we could at least temporarily hold it until we removed it.
That's treed.
Yeah, so we would have to make an area for that, if that's something that,
But we
Board would
can
like.
grade an area for that.
Mrs. Luttrell?
Sorry, I have one more. Are you going to have security? As a woman, I would hate to walk to one of those upper parking lots when it's dark out. That's a long way from that building.
We have not considered security, I guess is the best way to answer it. We have not considered security.
It would terrify me.
Before I open it up to the public, Freddie, I saw you holding up your iPhone, and I'm not that familiar with it. Were you recording anything?
Always asked if I were
Yeah.
looking at the GIS overlay of this property on
I just saw you holding it up, and I wasn't sure. Others have done that, and you know it's a violation of the open meeting law, but we would have resolved that by just having you ask permission, but since you weren't, let's move on. Yep. You're right, the planning board, we react to a lot of these projects, but we also try to do some planning and look over the horizon as to what's coming. And usually we look to the east, 128, and we know that whatever's happening there winds up, in
Yeah.
some form out here. So, and my question is gonna go to, as things change in the future, I know some people who work for global companies, and they don't have an office to go to. These huge companies are now steering away from the high expense and maintenance of owning or leasing office space, and they rely on the technology of their employees to work wherever they want to, or work out of their homes or in packs. And the company saves a lot of money from not having to heat and light a building and plow the snow and all of that. So if things continue to change, and maybe they'll change in that direction even further, or if your tenants move out, like you said, HP was there for many years and they're gone. So you get a new tenant and they're down to, 100 square feet per person, and then they leave, and the new people come in, and you don't need all this parking. So I think the board is gonna be interested in how, if that occurs, it would put the burden on a site plan approval to determine what would happen with this unused space relative to plowing it for nothing, or leaving it covered with snow, lighting it up for nothing, or shutting the lights off, removing it, those type of things, or changing it into a combination of things. So we'll be, and this is quite an addition, and it has a huge impact on the neighborhood, not just this neighborhood, but far away. There are people in town that remember driving across the causeway to Fayville and looking across the reservoir and seeing darkness. And that was before the early 1980s, when there was nothing there, except for White's Corner. And since then, that whole section of Route 9 is all lit up now, and has quite a few changes. The lights here are gonna be even higher than what's there now, and will be in addition to what lights we see as we go by on Route 9 and the neighborhoods out beyond the reservoirs, including in Fayville. There's homes that are quite elevated in parts of Fayville that look down on at quite a distance, but would be looking down at this additional lighting and reduced green space. So this has quite an impact, and want to make sure that it's done right.
Just a little bit of response. It's kind of like 2 points. The first point is Yes, they did do hoteling, you know, where people didn't really have an office. They came in and shared something and left. And now there's this, you know, the very much concept of collaborative working, where they've actually called people back into the office. And what you're building, not offices, but you're building these nodes of meeting areas where people can informally meet and talk and the rest. In terms of the parking, if we were to say we're trying to get 6-to-1 parking instead of the 3.3 in the code, that might become not viable in the future, depending on what happens with autonomous vehicles and the rest. But we're not there. We're moving from 3.3 to 1 per code up to 4.5. And that's better than code, but basically just competitive at this point in time. So I think that in the future, this would be a stabilized, if you will, property.
We'd probably be looking at something like requiring you to monitor the parking and the number of open spaces over time. And if you found that, you know, of these 176 or 66, we've got like 12 people that like to park there, and there's 50 parking spaces lower down that are available day after day, it would make you think that maybe you should close off the upper parking lots and you know, not have them lit up, not have them need to be plowed. These are the type of things that we'll talk about.
We would actually, we would do that. We don't want to plow it if we don't have to. We don't want to light it if we don't have to. I mean, there's savings there.
As far as the security, we have other parking lots in town. One is not too far from here, and it's very well screened, and it is a decent distance from the furthest parking spaces to the nearest building, nearest door. And they do have those stations that you'll see on college campuses where you may have a security guy in the building, not hanging around in the parking lot all night. But if a person feels that they need some help, they can go to one of those blue buttons and press it, and speak to a security person and have them respond. So that might be something that you'd look into also.
And the building hours, you know, are 7, the official building hours are 7 to 6 currently. But you know, people are working longer, definitely. So you know, it's a very good comment. We can certainly, you know, agree to provide some type of security till 9 or something like that.
So I'll open up to the public. Who wants to go first? Freddie. Eddie, are you a town official? Oh, okay. Recovering town official. Okay.
Hi, I'm Freddie Gillespie, Chair of the Open Space Preservation Commission, and our commission hasn't looked at this proposal, so I'm going to be speaking as a private citizen. I will say that in the past, we had looked at this property, the Open Space Commission, 10 or more, 20 years ago, ongoing, as an interesting piece for addition to the town conservation land, knowing it was landlocked as Res A and not really developable under the current zoning. So the proposal I heard of donating 4.5 acres or 5 acres, or was it 10? No. Sorry. Is greatly appreciated and something that, you know, we always like to get more open space. But having said that, I do also sit on the Stewardship Committee as a representative of the Open Space Commission, the Stewardship Committee for Breakneck Hill, who also hasn't met to talk about this. And I'm imagining the Conservation Commission's okay with this plan was based on wetland permitting concerns and not the wildlife habitat conservation values of the property. And we manage it for wildlife habitat and passive recreation. I have great concern. What I was looking at in my GIS is this is where the trail is. And that's a long distance of clearing. The trail is pretty close to it to be viewing into. So now you're changing the viewscape where the distance from the trail to here, and this doesn't really show where it cuts over, but even though it's sparsely wooded, the density of multiple trees creates a buffer. So now you're going to be looking right into it. I'm not sure. The summit of the property is up here, which you couldn't get a parking space there this weekend. I estimate there were hundreds and hundreds of people there, nonstop, at Breakneck Hill. The summit looks over here, and I have no idea. I know this is up, not as high maybe as the summit, but really, what's this? Are we going to be looking into a parking lot now?
I can kind of show you quickly, just for a second. So that, I'll show you on this one because you can kind of see it a little further. So this is the area right in here where there's that clearing, right along that loop, right there. That summit, this trail goes up, and then it kind of wraps when you're way out here. And there's that knoll of a hill kind of right in here, and it keeps going up, and the field is out in, Ben just died, out in here somewhere. So this section in here is about 100 feet or so, where you're going to be clearing. And then you go up the hill a ways. So this is a 100 scale. So right in here, this stretch right here is 100 feet. And then you go all the way up in here.
I would suggest that,
You could do an overlay.
I'd suggest when you come back, that you either take advantage of existing aerial pictures, but recently, I guess this has been around for a while, but I heard this drone in my neighborhood, and I didn't know what it was, and I saw a guy over there operating it, and I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm a realtor. That's what we do now. We have the drones go over the property and show it relative to the neighbors in the street, and what you'd see from a bird's eye view." I'm not sure if you want to go to that extent, but I think it's common, and I think that would help. Because again, this is a big impact on this neighborhood, and the more information you have relative to what's going to happen and the impact, if the aerial stuff will help, then I suggest when you come back you bring that.
Can I don't know if we can request this. Well, I can request anything, right? It would be pretty beneficial to us if there was some place here where you marked and could tell us what the different blazing colors meant.
Yep.
Edge of clearing for grading, edge of work, edge of clearing for parking lot. Even in the woods, if we could go in and see where that was, how far in you're going to be clearing. I do know, and it may not be necessary here, but when the building next door got done in the other Res A parcel, was off Breakneck Hill Road. They got a use variance back in the day. They put balloons up so we could actually go and see. Now, they were building up, but on the other hand, there was a much bigger, we got a few acres from them on that project, but it was much more, the building was much further away from the conservation land, and it was chunkier. If it was deeper. This here being that close, and the other concern is with the lighting. So we're concerned about people and views. We're also concerned about wildlife habitat and we're losing some species just because it doesn't get dark at night. And where this is one of our premier places, we're working right now, working on pollinators and other insects that are, lightning bugs. You don't see them anymore because, there's too much light, and they can't. There's a reason why they make the lightning is to find their mates, and they can't see each other anymore, so they're going away. And if this is an area where that sort of insect habitat is, putting lighting that close to it can have a great bigger effect than people often think about. So in addition to the view and the people, the birds and everything, they all need to go to sleep at night. And so I'm concerned about the lighting. I'm concerned about the view for people. But on the other hand, love getting a few more acres to be protected. But, and I when we're talking about more parking, more impervious surface, even with great stormwater control, is still more impervious surface. This grading, you're talking riprap, so now we're going to be walking down a trail in the woods and come across riprap? Is that what, not planting?
Well, you won't see it. It'd be down below, unless you walk to the edge and look down.
But we'll be walking right here.
If you walk to the edge, the trail is about 20 feet off that. If you go right to the edge, you could look down it, and see it.
That's kind of hard to visualize. One of the things I have to mention is the trail being 20 feet off is not quite 20 feet off because you might think there's woods there, that a lot of that is invasive species, and if we ever, had the resources to clear that out, we're not, it creates another problem there where you don't have that buffer. That buffer was not supposed to be treed between the trail and the stone wall.
Yeah, that's that portion of the trail that looks like it's pavement underneath. It used to be a road. Yeah, so I don't think you're going to move that trail, right?
No, but between the trail and
You
the...
may clear that out, thin it out.
So I guess what I'm asking for is if there's some way we could know exactly where this is going to be.
Stake maybe, and that's the limit of clearing there to right there. So you could see that area in there, see where it's going to be.
But we can do some aerial work just so it's a little
Yeah.
more, that's hard to understand
Yeah.
from there, and we're sensitive to
Mhm.
what the neighbors, we're happy to add 4.5 or 5 acres to the conservation land, if we can, but, we're sensitive to the end result, and that is accessory parking, so if it's not needed, or, certainly after certain hours, those lights go off.
And this is just a question. I don't know that planning board can do anything about this, but one of the things we always are looking at is connectivity, so people walk here. We know that there's heavy usage from your office buildings, or there has been in the past. You can see office workers coming out at lunch hour.
It's great, I'd do it.
People love it. But you can't get there from here often in this town, and it'd be really nice if there was a way to get from here to Starbucks. And I know you don't have control on your neighbor's property, but if everyone had to build up to as if there was continuation, and then the next time there's a project, they have to build a sidewalk or something, so that, eventually across the way, there's a trail here that goes out to Woodland Road. There could be housing built over there. Those folks might like to walk to Starbucks, or on the other way around, go over to walk to Walgreens. It's just something to consider, is connectivity in sidewalks on the edge of parking that connects, because we do want you to have connection for your workers to get to Breakneck Hill. We actually know that the study in Marlborough, their EDC did on what their businesses wanted the most in Marlborough, and one of the top things was connectivity to trails and open space for the workers. And we actually did a borough's loop trail plan based on that desire. So I'm interested in finding out how close that is. And, maybe we're just going to look right over and it's no big deal for the conservation land. I kind of think there will be an impact, though. And, last two things. In this area, whatever we can do to increase planting as a buffer, I know you said it's a steep slope, but
Yeah, we can look at
Well, let us look at that,
options.
you know.
We'll talk to the landscape architect, see if there's something.
and then,
In terms of your connectivity, that's a key, and it's key to us. I wish our people could walk to Starbucks as well. And right now, what's happening is they're walking, there's this little impromptu, if you want to call it, trail. You can't do it in the winter, is you can walk in behind the trees and then behind 144 Turnpike, and then there's this little path. You can go down the hill, and you can end up in the Starbucks parking lot. I've done it before. So we have connectivity because we have a path up to the conservation land, but we can't create that connectivity unless DePietri wants to do that.
well, I'm also looking at connectivity for not just your
Yes.
Yeah.
people.
We
Make
agree.
it a two-way street.
Yeah, if you
And
got
then-
from there to
It would
get
be-
through our site, and then you kind of,
Right.
you could make it, but you're not supposed to.
And then the final thing is the Open Space Preservation Commission has a new initiative called Native Pollinators, Native Plants. So we're going to be looking at the planting list and making suggestions. I know you said you have all natives, but we may make some additional recommendations.
Yeah, and the current planting list is attached to what we circulated. We didn't send it electronically because I couldn't find it, but we're
I think I
happy
have
to-
a copy, so
Okay.
I just
haven't
The intent
looked
was
at
to
it.
go all native, but
Then,
if you got recommendations that you prefer,
Yeah.
you see that work better for pollinators or whatever,
that's where, we're big on that and landscaping. That's no problem.
okay.
Very good, thank you. Anyone else want to speak? I guess go ahead, Eddie, grab the mic. You can see from, I think the people can see that the planning board tries to listen to and be sensitive to those people and groups that advocate for insects and birds. And also, at other parts of meetings, we listen to people who advocate for economic development, and it's our job to try to balance them.
Exactly.
But we just heard an example of, one extreme side of the equation, which is the insects and the birds. Mr. Rostella. Oh, the other thing is the connectivity. Back in the 80s, when the first office building and buildings were approved by the planning board, this board attempted to have a pathway connect straight to the restaurant, which was there at the time. And it never happened. It seemed like that the property owners expressed concern about people from other properties crossing their properties. And we looked at it actually as a kind of a win-win for the tenants and also for the businesses. At that time, it was just a restaurant, but as you say, there's quite a few options in that building now, Starbucks and
Some awesome-
different other things, and maybe we can try to work together, get the economic development people involved, and see what we can do as far as the neighbors and connecting.
maybe even a sidewalk down Turnpike Road. I know it's very busy, but if there's an option to, I don't know how much of a shoulder we have there. I don't think it's enough, but.
There's not much of a shot. I don't know if I'd
Yeah.
walk that
So
sidewalk.
you'd have to have a barrier. You definitely need a
I
barrier.
think it's the back way.
Yeah.
If there's any route, it's the back way.
Yeah, they do it. It's just not,
No.
just because if you couldn't get any neighbors to agree, that's the only thing, to try to go around.
Ed, if you could just introduce yourself.
Edward Estella, 21 Woodland Road, Southborough, Massachusetts. I'm a direct abutter. I'm here as an informational thing. I'm not here to oppose, or I just would like to make sure that the board gets all the correct information. I have incredible respect for. Yeah. Oh, no. Oh, that's good. Edward Estella, 21 Woodland Road. I think Mr. Morris made some interesting thing. I'd like Donnie to look at this. This is from a futurist called Thomas Frey, F-E-R-Y, and this talks about automobiles and how they're really going to impact what's really going on. I think you might want to get on it. There's 25 interesting things that basically say that the number of automobiles is really going to be cut down significantly with self-driving cars and so forth. So I just want to make that as a fact, not as an opposition. The other thing with self-driving cars, then you're not going to need the parking. And it's my understanding that there's a number of things, like police departments are not going to be giving tickets. People who own parking garages are going to be starving in 20 years. And the revenue from parking in the city of Boston is going to be significantly, taken down. So, but let's just go to the site. Interested in taking a look at that, scale down through that. I think it's a very interesting site. All right, I'm a direct abutter. This is my property right here. Living here for 1978, walked it many times. Just a number of concerns that I think what's going on. I think this structure, which is right here, which is connected to this, goes all the way over to picks up the stream that comes off of Breakneck Hill. There's nothing that basically cleans it. It goes through a structure and it dumps right into the stream, which goes directly into that. So my question on this particular structure here, is that going to be some sort of infiltrator or something like that you're going to process? Some try to clean the water a little bit, seeing because you have two, surface units coming into that, there may be a consideration. Second of all, you're coming really close to the walkway, which is right in here. And I've always been concerned because there's an incredible amount of runoff which comes down here and really doesn't get processed. And if you have your grade coming in this direction, it's only going to make it worse for the path coming down because the culvert on the path is on the east side. There is no culvert on the west side of the path to divert the water. So the path slopes to the east, comes down to the east side, and goes around the corner to the path that goes out to Woodland Road. At that point, the water just keeps going. Now the question, where does it end up? It ends up in shrubs and trees, or it basically can go back in here. If you look at the history of this particular site where it has shrubs and trees, this was all low. When this floods, the water actually goes into shrubs and trees. And if you look at the history of this, I don't know if you've gone back and look at back into 1970s, 80s, there was actually, this was a right-of-way that went down to Route 9. There was actually a pipe that went under there, and there was actually a stream, intermittent, that went across and through shrubs and trees that somehow magically got closed up. So my concern is what's going to happen to all this. And then the other thing is about the future of a septic system. Do you have any future expansion plans if something goes wrong here? Certainly you had a failure at the other location.
Well, this is
There's
a
a sand.
massively greater septic.
Right, I understand the process of the sand filter.
Yeah, so,
I can go through the whole, I'll go through the whole septic.
No, I guess my question is that if for some reason where you've chewed up so much of this land up here, and if you give away this to the town, where are you, how are you going to expand if you have to? That's all.
Up there is not, that's not suitable for septic systems.
Right, I understand that. It's pretty wet up there.
We'd want to put it
Okay,
anyway.
okay. The other thing I've noticed up through the years, there's a lot of stone, there's actually foundations, and I don't know if there's any historical significance to any of that stuff that's there.
There's none of there's a lot of stones just
Correct.
around, but all the big stone wall that's above us and that kind of stone, I don't know what that was.
Mhm.
That's above us.
Okay.
I can just,
You said something.
right, yeah.
Yep. You said something that this is going to be like a 14-foot elevation rise at this
Yeah.
point.
Down, yeah,
Dropping down.
yeah.
So my question is that when you're planning to get the water, you're going to try to drive it all back down this way.
Most of it, yeah.
Okay. The question is, if you can be really considerate on the water that's coming this way, because I think if you get any more water coming this way,
Yeah,
it's really not going to be fair to the guy down gradient here.
yeah, I went up and walked that whole, I can kinda
Okay.
just, you want to quickly go through and show you?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, because right in, so like you said, there's that path that goes
Right.
in here. and it grades this way.
Correct.
There's that swale.
Right.
And the end's past us.
Correct.
So that ends,
And it
and then
takes
all
a-
this is graded towards us. So all our site work directs it this way.
Right.
And all this runoff goes this way. So this is kind of a divide between.
It really
two.
can't go this way because
Well,
it'd have to go around the
well,
corner. It-
down here.
It absolutely does. And this elevation is higher than
Yeah.
the walkway, so
Yeah.
it shears down this way, ends up in the culvert that's on this side of, not the culvert, but the little
Yeah, there's a swale on that
swale
side.
on that side, and that, it's supposed to go around, and then at one point, there was some pipes, I think, that
Mhm.
took it over this way. All that stuff has all disappeared, so all the natural water that's supposed to,
Yeah.
drain here is really being directed down into this location, so.
Yeah, luckily, we're kind of a little bit of segregated there because we have that, like you said, that
Right.
swale, and then, so it kind of works out
Well,
in that area.
Is there, I guess in the process of correcting and doing all your grading over here, is there a way to sort of to help at the bottom of this area to try to pick up any of the runoff that comes down that, is there a way that you could help us on that? I don't know. Okay.
I don't know. I could look at it, it's a
All
lot of runoff that comes
Okay.
down there, that's
All
the
right.
thing.
The other thing is that there is connectivity that walks behind it. I mean, I walk to Starbucks all the time. It is wide open. Certainly, the path out to Woodland Road isn't being used as much as it has been in the past, and it would, it's fine, it can be opened up. I guess the other thing that I'm still trying to have in my own mind is that the assessor has both buildings as two different parcels and two different so forth. You're saying that it's one parcel.
It's one parcel.
Here you go.
Sorry.
You take this one.
Yeah.
I think it's for taxing to assessors.
Okay,
What?
it's one, where do you have the site plan for
Over.
both buildings?
That's
Yep.
Yeah. So what they did is this is one parcel, but they ground lease, I can show you, this parcel owns this land
Okay.
and leases this land to the owner of this building. And that's what they did. And so there's a separate legal description, if you will, for this building compared to this building. But it's one parcel. This building doesn't own that parcel of the land. This building ownership owns all the land and leases this portion to this
Okay, it's my understanding that you said that you folks own both parcels
now. But I'm
now.
saying
Okay,
previously-
let's deal with today. It's my
Right
understanding.
now, we
Okay.
own the land and both buildings.
Okay, so I guess my question is this then, if in fact this does take place, so how is the benefit distributed across these two buildings? Is it equal sharing? I mean, if somehow if you're talking as if these were two parcels, I get a little confused that,
No, it'll be calculated as equal sharing. Now, is it realistic that somebody over here is gonna go over here? Probably not. So what'll happen is, these people will be parking here, and these people will be parking here.
okay. The other question I want to
But
have,
we can give the parking
Okay.
to anyone.
are these spaces yours around the
Yes.
perimeter? Okay,
Yes.
so that
So
gets
this-
calculated in,
This
okay,
parks this. This is, just because of its location,
Right.
this is almost exclusively for this building.
show around the edge, those are the abutters.
okay, so this is all, this is not grass, this is actually paving in here.
There's 96 stalls.
Okay, right there,
Yes.
okay. And then there's no other parking spaces in here?
There's parking here.
It's not
here.
shown?
We just didn't put the lines in.
Okay, you didn't put the shown,
It's
okay.
here, it's
Okay.
here, it's
Okay.
here, it's the other side of here.
Okay, so I just think in the application somehow, we've got, it's always referred to as two parcels, not a parcel, and I'm just trying to figure that out. So how are you gonna be giving approval? Is it based on one, or is it gonna be based on two?
I think I understand the confusion. That is one property, that's one lot identified as two portions, not parcels. So because there's two buildings, there's two addresses, 118, 120, but it's really bounded and owned by one property owner.
Because we've been using both addresses in this application.
Right.
So it's one big lot,
Right.
but the assessor, for probably tax purposes, as Vito pointed out, there's an arrangement with the buildings in that one lot. So they identify those territories on that lot.
Yeah,
But
but I
it's
I
one
get a
lot.
little confusing when they basically say it's 20 acres total, when in fact, the parcel that in fact is going to have the net benefit is the parcel has 9 acres. It has nothing to do with the 3.5 acres to the front. So, you know, this is the way that I see this thing described. I mean, it just seems a little convoluted. I mean,
I think it's just described that way for tax purposes. It's really just one big
well,
lot.
I mean, I merged property with mine. Mine is
Yeah.
all, basically, I had different lots, so they all merged to one. And, you know, I have multiple houses on my property, and it's 21, my main house, my little house is 21C. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
Vito,
these
am I
numbers.
correct to say there's no property line? That's like a
Yeah,
zone
and
line.
it used to be, though, two different owners of, the buildings were owned by two different people, so they had to be taxed separately.
Mhm.
so-
But
So
through a
they
lease
created
arrangement, though.
I understand it, but it's just,
Yeah,
so what I'm trying to figure out
Like if
is,
someone on your lot, say someone owned one of the other houses on your lot and needed to pay taxes on it, they'd need to create a separate assessor's map and parcel number so they could pay
Right, it
taxes
just
on a
seems to
lot
be-
that you
yeah.
own.
well, it just
It's a
seems,
confusing spot,
well,
but
it just seems,
now they own the whole thing, so it doesn't, it's kind of moot point, but.
One second. Mr. Jenks?
Ed, what is your concern with that, and how does that affect the planning board?
I'm just trying to understand the definition of the project. I mean, I've done these things in the past, you know, and I understand, it just seems as though that, that there is two distinct, in the eyes of the assessor, there is two distinct land masses, square footage buildings, and addresses. So, either it is or it isn't. So that's what I'm trying to figure out. So it may be on one parcel, one landmass, but somehow they're still described as individual parcels.
I guess what I'm getting at is maybe the assessor's got to look at this, but do we? Is that what you're saying? Or-
Well, I would assume that if in fact it is considered one parcel, then it should be defined as one parcel, and any approval should be based on not one parcel and not two parcels, you know.
Say, well taken.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none? So, the approval period for the site plan and the special permit, site plan is November 24th. November 24th, and for the lower impact development is December 24th. So, it would appear that these public hearings would need to be continued to a future date. And we do have room on our October 29th agenda. Would you want to come back for that meeting?
I'm good.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to extend the public hearing for 118 and 120 Turnpike Road, major site plan approval to 7:30 PM on October 29th, and also extend the public hearing for 118, 120 Turnpike Road special permit lower impact development for 7:35 on October 29th, 2018.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Mr. Jenks? All in favor? 4-0. We'll see you on the 29th.
All right.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a discussion. It's the update of the 2008 master plan. I'll ask the town planner to start that discussion. We have in our packet a master plan 2018 outline. So work has already begun on this update, this process to update it. Oh, it might be within this. Do you have this? Yeah, mine is, well, it's got, the board doesn't have this. Or is this from a previous meeting?
No, you do, at the end of your package, right before.
You're holding something, he's got something different.
Oh, yeah, Don, you're in the wrong,
That's from, I think, the last meeting.
yeah. That's the last one, so in
Yep.
this meeting, in your package, in this one.
Yep.
Second to last section.
Right.
you'll have-
Go ahead.
Okay. So at one of the prior meetings, after discussion of what the master plan entails and the big picture, planning office was tasked to come up with some categories of groups of people that would be focused on in order to recruit members for a steering committee for the update to the 2008 master plan. So the first page you see is a list of different committees, commissions, boards, and groups similar to what was part of the 2008 master plan of the groups that should be involved in helping come up with updates to see what's changed, who have knowledge base and understanding of the history and know the goals of the town. So that list, and I can put it up on the screen too. Let me just get that so people see. No, I don't have it. Oh, yes, I do. Here it is. Mm-hmm. Okay, and as you can see, some of the groups are the Planning Board Committee Chairperson, a Fayetteville Representative, Corridor 9 Chamber of Commerce, Southville Road Neighborhood Network, Historical Commission, Council on Aging, Senior Center, Recreation Department, Open Space Preservation Commission, Conservation Commission, Downtown Representative, someone from the School Committee, Zoning Board of Appeals, and of course the Town Administrator, Board of Selectmen, Planning Board, possibly a consultant team, pending on what's found during the initial meetings. So if you have any suggestions for other groups we could target. Yes, we have zoning board, don't we? Zoning Board of Appeals on there, but the EDC, yes. Okay, and then the second page, and Pam Rivera, my relatively new assistant's been spearheading some of this work for us. She came up with some ways of getting people engaged in the process. How can we reach out to these groups? And these are the ways: collecting information from the community through a survey process. The EDC has experience with that, so we'll tap into how their programs worked in doing that. Community meetings, get input and draw ideas from other boards of items, points of interest, work with the EDC on a community outreach campaign, have a sign-up sheet at the town's library for people to sign up to be involved in subcommittees, set up an area on our website for information, ways to get involved, and subcommittee information pertaining to the master plan, and public meetings and hearings as a platform for discussion and updates. So maybe initially a document to some of the formal boards where they could mention it to the audience and during their planner's report to just get this started. So we're open to additional ideas. And once we have a starting point, those people, it'll be a snowball effect. If we get a few people, they'll help brainstorm and it will grow to a decent group and they'll add to this.
Might want to advertise on SAM as well.
what do you think of initiating this list with identifying a planning board committee, planning board chairperson? If we have that, then that person can reach out to these other groups and lean on them to identify a member to serve on the master plan group. So, is there anyone that wants to volunteer to be the planning board committee master plan chairperson?
Don't everybody jump at once.
So it would appear that the members need to be a little bit more time to think about if they want to do this. I know when we did the zoning advisory committee, we had co-chairs, and that worked out pretty well. And we might want to do that too. So why don't we have to keep this moving. We can't let this take forever. And it's potentially a very big project. It's also potentially something that can be done efficiently in the next several months. Any questions or comments on it? Mrs. Luttrell? Okay, you're the chairperson.
I'd be willing to co-chair. I don't want to take the whole thing on myself.
Oh, it's
If
wonderful.
I have a partner in crime.
Why don't, Mr. Mills?
I was gonna suggest we maybe see what happens at the next meeting, and maybe we can convince someone to co-chair.
Why don't we vote to have Mrs. Luttrell be one of the co-chairs tonight, and let her begin the process of reaching out to these others, with the understanding that her appointment as a co-chair is dependent upon having another co-chair. We wouldn't have you be the co-chair and then never appoint another one.
So my term lasts until the next meeting? If no one else volunteers.
Well, there's a little bit of thinking that needs to go into this. So, entertain a motion to appoint Mrs. Luttrell as the master planning board chairperson,
So moved.
co-chairperson.
Make a motion that Ms. Luttrell be one of the co-chairs of the master plan subgroup committee.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion, do we have to create this, is it a, you know how we got into that? Is it a working group? Is it a subcommittee? And we got guidance on that. And I guess. So in order to appoint someone, it would have to be created first as either a working group or a subcommittee, and filed with the town clerk, right? I think that's the way we do it.
If that person is the chair for that subcommittee, but if you're just assigning somebody to, but you're saying co-chair. If you're assigning just a task to one person to initiate something, we don't, because we need the people to create the committee. You know what I mean? It's what comes first.
Well, no, the planning board would create the working group or the subcommittee or the committee. We would vote to do that, and then, once it's created, it's virtually vacant, and then the process could begin to fill those positions.
So a subcommittee with a charge, and how many members? Do you have to define how many members right now, or you just leave that open?
Yeah, I guess we'll have to look into that. So, maybe the motion should be changed so that we can keep this moving, would be to accept Mrs. Luttrell's volunteering to reach out to these other groups between now and October 29th, to inform them and start them in the process of identifying a volunteer or voluntold.
So moved.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor? 3-0, 4-0. Okay, so Mrs. Latrell has been tasked with at least starting to reach out.
So that leaves it more open.
And then,
until-
well, for now, but I think we should task the town planner to
Research, making a subcommittee.
to find out if this type of, because this, let's call it a working group. This working group will have a deliverable. It'll be the 2018 or 2019 updated Town of Southborough Master Plan. So it has to, they may maybe say, well, you have to have a charter. What is it? Well, it's, what's the purpose of this? The purpose is to update the existing master plan.
Mhm.
It might be that simple. But there may also be a time limit that we would have to identify. And then the size of the people on the working group. Or if we're better off calling it something different that better fits what we're trying to do. But you can see that this will probably involve a consultant at some point to help us through it. And there's plenty of them out there that do these updates of master plans.
And I want to point out that there is a, let me just grab this. Year-end article disposition amount from when the original master plan was formed. There is an amount that we've rolled over for $7,329. That's available to help if we need a consultant.
Submit your timesheet. All set with that one? Any more on the master plan? Next item on the agenda is the budget for FY '20. The town planner has to submit the first draft of the planning department, planning board, FY '20 budget on Wednesday. It begins that long process. And I've had several discussions with the town planner on this. I think she's got her arms thoroughly wrapped around the process and a firm grip on things that we need in our budget to be successful in that fiscal year. So, last couple of years, the board has entrusted me to work with the town planner in developing numbers. So,
So moved.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion. Looking at, it's all public information on our FY '19 budget, and you can see the budget line items have a budget line item number, and they have a brief description. For example, 53000 is a line item for medical. Our number for that is 0. There's, supplies, miscellaneous contracted services. That's, a big one, along with, the salaries and the training that's necessary. So I know you're all familiar with these budget line items, and feel free to check in with myself or Karina as we work our way through this. So the first draft will be submitted on Wednesday to the town administrator?
No, to the treasurer.
Oh, treasurer.
To the treasurer by noon on Wednesday.
And then there'll be multiple discussions and meetings. We wind up going before advisory, and eventually the whole town's budget gets built. Last year I think we did a good job, a really good job in previous years. So, here we go again. So, any more discussion? All in favor? 3-0, or 4-0. So Karina, you and I will work on this draft.
Okay.
Next item on the agenda is other business properly before the board, the planner's report.
Yes. Okay, the first thing on the planner's report, I just want to talk about, we have an upcoming application potentially for Zero Furman Ave. We've had discussions with them before. The company is Americo that now owns it, and they want to change the building from office use to U-Haul storage, 5 stories. So 4 stories above will be the storage units, and then the first floor will be U-Haul retail service, that kind of thing. The attorney for the applicant submitted an introduction letter in where he describes he's submitting a major site plan approval application, but felt that they aren't required to do a lid application. So we talked on the telephone, and he explained that in the bylaw of low-impact development, there's an applicability paragraph that states, if you have a major site plan, it triggers lid. If you disturb more than 1 acre, it triggers lid. If there's some residential subdivision over 5 acres, it triggers lid. Then it's followed by a section for exemptions, and the first exemption is unless, if you disturb less than 1 acre, you don't need a lid. So it was my impression that when you have a major site plan, you're required to have lid. You're required to apply for a special permit for lid, and that you would ask for a waiver if the technical aspect of the project doesn't trigger all those main features that would cause all that disturbance. But he was concerned that he didn't want to give up his right to the exemption listed in case he is correct. So I suggested that he submit the applications, request the waiver, but also state that he would like to reserve his right for exemption in the future, and that it could be determined during major site plan process, either by the board or through town council's opinion, if he does in fact need the waiver or is truly exempt. So I just wanted to get some feedback if any of you had history or precedence of major site plan just requires a lid, that's it, or how that exemption applies.
My memory's telling me that we did not say that it was exempt. We said that it would make sense for them for the proponent to request that we waive the lid, because all of the components of the lid won't change with the new owner or with the new use. So I don't recall saying that it doesn't apply. Anyone else?
I agree with that.
I would think if he reserves his right to ask for a waiver, he'd be fine doing that. I can understand him not wanting to take any action that would require a lid if, in fact, it doesn't require it. I think that particular regulation could be read either way. I don't think it's very clear. So I think the advice that Karina has given is good about going ahead without waiving his right.
Yeah, and there's also the concern that if we say that it doesn't apply, that future projects make sure that we get it cleared up if it does become an issue, so that we can understand it for future projects. We want to make sure that what we do for this project is consistent with what we've been doing, is consistent with our interpretation of the code, and also will be consistent in the future as it applies to similar existing buildings that are going to be used for something else. Next.
Okay. I emailed all the planning board members. EDC wants to coordinate a meeting with the various boards and commissions to discuss a possible bylaw change to the business village district, which would allow certain number of units, apartments, and such. And then, so in the email I sent you, Claire Reynolds, who's the interim Economic Development Committee coordinator, had a few dates, and I asked her if it was possible that maybe we have a joint meeting during one of the regular planning board meetings, like the 29th, and she said she would talk to her committee about that. That would be best, because it's a standard time. Everybody knows when it happens. So just so you're aware, if that happens, we'll put that on the agenda. Okay. Oh, and also the ZBA is meeting on the 17th to discuss a project that might be impacted by a bylaw change like this. So they were kind of monitoring what was happening at the next ZBA meeting, just so you know. Okay. Good with that? Any feedback? No? 4 Hidden Meadows, Rebecca Franks, at one of the prior meetings, when we were reviewing the drainage plan for number 6 Hidden Meadow, which was required as part of a condition for them to get their building permit signed. During that discussion, there was talk also of another condition not related to the building permit that said the open space language is required to be in the deed for both the remaining number 4 Hidden Meadows and the new lot. The new lot, because it's been conveyed, has the open space language in it. Rebecca Frank's current property does not, because it hasn't been conveyed. So Leslie Carey at that meeting volunteered to prepare an easement deed and submit it to Rebecca Frank's in order to maybe remedy that. Not that it needed remedy, but to try and help with that condition. It is Rebecca Frank's opinion that she doesn't feel that she needs to put that language in until it's conveyed, until she actually sells her property for various reasons, and she doesn't want to record the easement deed that Leslie Carey had prepared. I think she feels it will complicate things. She says the plan that exists, and she's getting advice from where she works, from other attorneys, the plan that has the open space language in it during the modification of the subdivision, and the decision that was recorded for the modification both state the language for the open space restriction. So there's record of that. So she wanted to say that unless the town wants to record that easement, she wasn't going to, and if you wanted her to, then she would want a letter from town council saying she's required to. Personally, I don't think it's a big deal. If she conveys the lot in the future, she will put it in there. It is recorded in the decision. So just an update on that.
Any comments from the board on that?
So during the hearings, she agreed to this condition.
Yes, but
Now she's pushing back so hard. So what's the guarantee of when she conveys it that will actually ever get filed?
well, the decision is recorded from that modification that has that condition in it. And the condition doesn't have a time frame set to it. So in the future, I think that when I write a condition like that, I'll have to tie it to a schedule. So, for example, it just says you know, the open space language will be in the deed of both lots. But it doesn't say when. I was able to require it for the building prior to the building permit being signed off by the planning board, because we had that avenue. And it was, I think, stated in that it needed to be prior to the building permit, but not for the existing lot. So I don't know,
Mr. Mills?
I think this is an example of how she kind of got in this predicament to begin with. That things weren't tied off with a pretty little bow at the completion of the original project. So I would be in favor of, if we gotta ask Aldo, or send her a letter saying we want it, you gotta do it. I'd just like to know it's done, and then we can move on.
and I'm not sure that Leslie Carey didn't offer to record it. I think the information was sent over and said, here's the easement deed, you want to take care of it or us, or something like that. And this is third-party hearsay. So I think there was just, I think there's other things going on, but we could get an opinion from Aldo, or we could hold, or you could.
Let's hear from Mr. Jenks.
I have a couple questions. Do we know if the document that contains that language is in the chain of title for her property? That would depend on how it was recorded and whether her property was, or her deed was referenced, maybe in a marginal sense. The bottom line, from my standpoint, is I think we ought to ask Aldo.
I agree, and it seems completely, I mean, if everything else was just fine, everything was cool, if somebody wanted to market their property, then the potential buyer, in doing the due diligence, would check out the existing deed, which right now is silent relative to this. You would think that you'd want it in the deed so that the buyer knew what they were getting into. So let's move it, let's see if Aldo will, based on the deal, the agreement that we made on this, if the board and the town has the authority to insist that the deed be revised.
Okay, because doesn't a deed describe the property? So if your property limits change, don't you have to show in your deed that, here's your deed description now, your meets and bounds and your distances, verbally? Isn't that the deed description?
Well, the official description is in fact in the deed, and plans are sometimes not referenced or included in that. But the deed description is in fact the legal description of the property. What happens with buyers, they don't always, in fact, in my experience, they infrequently look at a property description when they're in the process of deciding to buy that. The deed gets looked at when typically a lender requires a title examination so they can buy title insurance. And that's very often not completed until just days before the closing itself. And if they find something at that point that they didn't know about or didn't expect, it very frequently raises questions about the closing. So I think if that's what everyone agreed to, or she agreed to, then it ought to be represented in the chain of title.
Okay, because the other lot has sold. So I thought that if you sell off a piece of your lot, your deed has to be rewritten to describe what you have left. So I'm just,
That's correct, but that doesn't necessarily mean it got rewritten the way it should have been. We don't know that
Right.
unless we see it.
Well, we do know
Well,
that,
we do now, we do if she said it
Hasn't been
wasn't
done.
put in there,
right.
yeah,
And it doesn't, it's not understood why it wasn't done.
yeah.
and I was under the impression a deed wasn't rewritten, that she's just still has her original deed, but I don't know how that can happen, so, okay.
I was just asking about the minutes. That's the next item on the agenda.
Can I just do a couple more real quick things?
Oh, sure.
For the planner's report. We have a 5G antenna update. Dawn Morris, Lisa Bracchio, Mark Purple, and I met and had a discussion on how to go about responding to Heidi Davis. Mark Purple has engaged the Municipal Technology Committee to do some research on some other bylaws and report back to him, because they're probably have more expertise in it than the rest of us. So by November 15, they'll be reporting back to Mark Purple, because that may be a potential warrant article. Town Council is looking to schedule that global session workshop. Please coordinate with Carol Ostrich. She's the one running all the numbers. So if you send me something, just copy Carol so she knows what days you're available. Fayville Hall put out a new RFP. Board of Selectmen put out a new RFP for Fayville Hall. The bids are due November 12th, so we'll be able to see what happens then. You all have Southborough email addresses now, whether you use them or not, I don't know. I've been using your old emails in case you haven't been.
You can use my new official one.
New one? Okay.
Use my old one.
Okay. The RFP for the solar canopies has come in for the public safety building to the Public Safety Building Committee. They discussed it at last week's meeting, but I haven't had a chance to review what happened there. I reiterated to the chair of that committee that if something changes that's significant, they have to come back to planning board if it would impact the site plan. The warrant, the money warrant articles close this Wednesday, which I don't think we have any, but there are, you have to let me know if we going to have any placeholders by November 30th, whether we're going to have something for the 55 plus bylaw, the open space design bylaw subcommittee. There's been comments on SHOPC and whether that committee is still needed. Should that be dispersed or not? Because we have the Affordable Housing Trust and other departments. It was kind of a redundant committee. So there's talk of that. Building inspector has accepted another position. So there's a search for a new building inspector. You had a question?
If SHOPC is disbanded, does that mean we have to change zoning? Because SHOPC is referred to throughout our zoning. So I think it's more than just getting rid of them.
Yeah, there was a question on what it would take to do that. And it's a Board of Selectmen appointed committee. So they were looking at if that needed to be done or if not. We had 2 new members recently join that. So that's kind of just up in the air right now, still figuring that out. Building inspector, warrants. That's it.
Can I ask a question on another subject?
Mm-hmm.
Has the Recreation Commission reached out to you on a site plan on the lights on Mooney Field or the Richardson tennis court?
Yes, they actually submitted applications for both those projects a couple weeks ago, and I didn't accept them because they were missing some information. So last week they submitted new applications, some corrections, hopefully some new informations. I haven't had a chance to review them. It's on my plate for tomorrow to see if they met that, and if they did, we'll be filing those applications and getting them on the November 19th planning board meeting, because they have to be advertised. So when we got them last week, it was too late to run them in the paper for the 29th. The planning board meeting on the 20th. So most likely they'll hit on the November 19th, I think it is.
Okay,
But
great.
The key thing, the most important thing is that when these applications are submitted by any proponent, that you perform that review. And if the application is incomplete, if it has omissions, if it has conflicting information, then it gets pushed back. It does not start the clock ticking. It does not get accepted. And that's important to have an efficient and clear path to, the site plan.
Yes, so I'll be looking at that probably tomorrow and moving forward, one way or another. So that's all I have, and we do have meeting minutes.
Make a motion, we accept the meeting minutes from April 30th, 2018.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? 4-0.
Make a motion, we accept the meeting minutes from May 14th, 2018.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Mr. Mills.
Make a motion, we accept the meeting minutes from May 21st, 2000.
No, we don't have those yet.
Oh,
We have October 2nd, though. I'm working on them from the back, and Pam's working on them forward to catch up, so I don't know if is that appropriate to do them out of line like that?
It is, it certainly is. The sooner we can get any of them on the website, the better, but I don't think I've looked at the October 2nd one.
Okay, so it's all right to
Oh, yeah.
get them to you when they're done?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
So the other one is, it's not on the agenda, but October 2nd is in your hands to look at.
okay.
But Dawn, I don't think had a chance to review it.
So our next meeting is October 29th. Is there any questions or comments from the public?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor? We're adjourned.